And we're back after Memorial Day weekend. Happy Memorial Day.
Happy Memorial Day to everybody. Hope you got a nice day off. Did some grilling out. Did some cooking out. It is May 27th, the year 2025. Welcome aboard, everybody. You listen to the Crushing Iron podcast, and this is episode 853.
It sure is. Cloudy and a little cool, but it's nice here.
Did you grill out some dogs and brats and burgers yesterday?
The answer is no.
The answer is
I cleaned the grill.
Unequivocally, no.
I had to clean the grill.
It was rainy and dreary here, and honestly, I was all up for it.
Really? Yeah, I mean.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like, I'm not a big get out and go thing. We went to a little cookout on Saturday for a little bit, and that was enough peopling for me. And then yesterday I was like, you know what, just give me rain and gross all day, just so I can just like veg out for a bit, watch a little bit of the French Open, watch a little hockey. Hayden still had hockey practice last night, which I'm not sure how I feel about that, but yeah, there really is no off season. But yeah, it was great time. Slower race weekend for sure, but that's about to ramp back up here. But yeah, nice little Memorial Day. Hope you all had a good week. I was a little bit busy the end last week, so apologies for the one caster. But I was trying to get rid of my Nashville allergy funk and got rid of that. Sniffle free, cough free, sneeze free for at least a couple weeks here. But yeah, the green always does it, and the flowers do it, but it comes with a cost. But yeah, busy couple weeks here. We got, really June. We're basically in June. June is the North American 70.3 month, where it feels like every 70.3 has happened. Obviously, you had Chattanooga that just happened, but then you've got Eagleman 70.3, Des Moines 70.3. You got the new Rockford race that's coming, and we were talking a little bit about before we went live about that race. Tons of Olympics and plenty other Hawaii 70.3s this weekend. So it is full on, full gas. And always, like, it was actually before we got going today, like I was one of the athletes that I work with, and one of our coaches, Parker Watt, he did, I guess there's like this Cap Tex Olympic race yesterday in Austin. He lives in Austin. And obviously, like today here in Overland Park, like we talked about this a little bit before, but it's very pleasant and cool. But then looking at like the latter part of the week, it's going to get humid, it's going to get sticky, and it's going to get, not so pleasant. And, I think this is always, and I think we have this conversation every time of the year, or every time this time of year, but everybody gets kind of like the itch to go out and to do more training. It's light in the morning a little bit more, it seems. It's lighter in the day. School's out for a lot of people. You got a little more flexibility, or maybe you're a little more, schedule strict because of, kids not in school. You got to do more adherent to like an early morning schedule. But what it usually happens is the warmer weather, the humidity, and the dew point always kind of comes at the same time where like your peak training is coming. So you do all this training in the winter, you work your butt off, you train in the fall and the winter, you're working hard, you're building your base, you do some building. Again, temperatures are still relatively I would say comfortable, dew point low, humidity low, temperature nothing really to speak of. And then it seems in like a 2-week span, it goes from feeling like very, very comfortable to like not hyperventilating, to be a little bit dramatic, but like, how am I going to get through all this? Where did my fitness go? Because you see this like almost immediate drop in, especially with running. And I honestly see not a huge drop in, again, people think it's a drop in performance. It's not, right? Because the performance is I think is relative to terrain, is relative to wind, it's relative to heat. There's so many different factors that go to your ultimate performance. But when you're trying to like bang out numbers, especially at the end of a block, to get a decent idea of where you want to be on race day, going from cool, comfortable, pretty much perfect temps, or pretty much steady state rain, which I think the East Coast has pretty much had for like the last month. It's hard to find and feel good about where you want to go on race day when you don't really have, I think, the data and the numbers to kind of back up an actual, a goal pace, a goal watt, or even a heart rate range, really, for some people, because you haven't even gotten acclimated. Because for here, we were 80 for 2 weeks, and we've been in the 50s. Like, I'm in a hoodie and sweatpants today, sitting in the office doing the podcast. It's like, it's summer. My kid's out of school. I'm expecting like 80s and sunshine. I didn't complain yesterday in my run, but the point being is, when you have these races coming up and you're 2-3 weeks out and you've had this really, really comfortable weather, it's very similar to, an athlete coming to you in March and then mid-April, they're going to go do like Ironman Texas or Texas 70.3, and they have all these indoor rides and no outdoor rides to speak of. All their numbers, all their heart rate data, even all their fueling strategies has come from their indoor trainer in their basement with no outdoor numbers. And everyone's power is different outside compared to inside, whether it's a different power meter or it's obviously easier to generate power outside. So what do you go with? Same for now, right? You go from comfortable conditions, easy, not easy, but easier training conditions. Then all of a sudden you're probably going to show up on race day. It's going to be a little more humid. It's going to be a little hotter. It's going to be a little bit warmer. Or excuse me, a little bit hotter. Core temp's going to be higher. Conditions are going to be more challenging, more than likely a bit more windy. And how do you go from there? How do you adjust, what may or may not have been your expectation for a race based on the numbers you were saying with now the reality of, staring down a sticky, hot and humid race that you're not necessarily prepared for. And that goes for those of you that are racing, but also those of you that are just training, right? You go out for training one day and all of a sudden it goes from 50 to 80 and you're used to seeing 830s and now it's 910s. You kind of have to adjust your thinking of like, I'm not getting slower, right? I haven't lost performance. This is just going to take some time for my body to adapt to this new stress, which is hotter temps, higher dew point, higher humidity.
Yeah, well, one way I've been getting around that is it hasn't been super hot here, but if you get in the water, which is still in the 60s, that'll cool you off a little bit. And I just brought that up because am I missing this, or have we had like 5 Ironman 70.3s in North America and 4 of the swims have been canceled already?
Yeah,
is that accurate?
I was trying to stay away from that because it gets my blood boiling a little bit. But
I was like,
you're just poking the bear today. I know, like I got the text
so I get in the water
Thursday. I know, right? We both had athletes race in Victoria, and I'm like, what is going on here? Like, and I mean, I get it from like why we're canceling them so far out. I mean, but then I kind of don't, right? Because it's like once you cancel them, you can't really uncancel them. But yeah, anyway, I'm gonna keep going because I'm gonna shrink back into my shell and not go off on a tangent.
Oh, come on. So, I mean, yeah, because I've been trying to get back in the water and swim a little bit. Man, it feels good, but I don't know, man. It's, yeah, because I used to race, as you know, Rev 3 Olympic. Because that was like the first, it was in May, right? I think, yeah. And I always felt like I couldn't handle a 70.3 that early, the way my training went and kind of thing like that. And so it was always nice to open with an Olympic and get a little taste of the heat and then just sort of build, just build up to your distances. But yeah, it's tough coming out of the gate when you've had a lot of indoor training or cool weather training, and then all of a sudden it just like slams in on you. And even like 75 or 80 can feel super hot. Like I remember we were doing chat 70.3, that could be super hot even in May, just because of the contrast of what you've been used to. But yeah, I mean, what are you going for here, man? With the
like in my opinion, like, and I think a lot of people, obviously you want to be heat acclimated, you want to get out in there and do and be in the conditions, but I think the two biggest things you have to be aware of this time of year and that you should really be shooting for is one, and this is part, I think, the frustration with some athletes right now with their training, and honestly just probably with Mother Nature, is that there is no consistency, right? In order to get adapted to the heat, or at least get adapted to the new reality of your new paces and watts and RP and heart rate and certain, at certain paces and efforts and watts, is you need consistent exposure over, a 10 to 14, 18, 20, 20-day span. And right now in the late spring, early summer, you don't really get that. You get what we get now. Like 2 weeks ago, it was hot, it was 80, and now it's in the 50s. Like, so the acclimation that you had is now gone, and you kind of restart again. But most of the time by mid-June, you're going to have that back. So once you get it, and once you see a good stretch of, 7, 10, 14 days where it's going to be hot, it's going to be sticky, you have to consistently expose yourself to those conditions. Once or twice a week ain't going to cut it. It's just going to suck. And that's what you see a lot. And you probably see this too with your athletes. I always have athletes that kind of they stick themselves inside to protect themselves from the reality that is the summer. So don't want to run outside because it's a little discouraging. It's a little frustrating. It's a little disheartening. Even though they're going to race in it, you can't choose. Hey, I know that race coming up at 7.3. I'm going to go for the indoor option in the AC. I'm opting out of that. I'd like to race inside, not outside. Your race is outside. So the longer you avoid training outside, biking outside, running outside, swimming outside, the harder it's going to be for you on race day. I know it is a hard switch to flip to kind of see your paces and your effort drop because of the heat, but don't delay. Just get out there. Even go out in the hottest part of the day. If you can, get out and get your runs and your easy stuff. Go out and do all of your volume as much as you can outside, right? Because it's interesting because you also have it's also long course season for swimmers. So most of your pools, if you have access to them, go to 50 meters. That's a whole nother issue, for people going from 25 yards, 100 meters. It feels that much longer, that much hotter. But are also usually outside. The same air you're breathing, the humidity, the dew point, it's the same It's the same when you're swimming it is in the run. So I would 100% make sure you are focusing on getting outside, exposing yourself to the elements, making sure you're, obviously taking down the expectation a little bit. So I would do that, first and foremost. And the other thing, and I think the other reason why it's so important to get out there right now is I honestly don't think, yes, you have to be in the heat. You have to go out and do things that are very, very hard to, acclimate to the conditions. But what I think most people need to acclimate to is how they feel when they get hot. Because for some reason, when people get hot, I mean, obviously, when we get really, really cold, when we get really, really hot, our body sends us a signal. It's like, hey, warning signs, the bells are going off, and you're like, hey, something's not going right, and it makes yourself slow down. But I think people have a lot higher of a kind of a fear factor when it gets hotter. When if it's 105 degrees, people really go a lot slower versus when if it's 30s or 40s, they're still going to go hard. They just can't because of how cold it is. But what I think people really need to kind of get accustomed to, especially if they're racing like a sprint, Olympic, or a 70.3, is what it feels like to be hot, get hot, and stay hot. Obviously, you never want to overheat, but we always talk about, training to get used to pain, training used to discomfort. Everyone has a different, my 10 on my, my discomfort level, my pain scale is very different than your 10. Same thing, our 1s and our 4s and our 5s. Everyone has a different pain scale. Some people have a really, really high pain scale. They can go really, really, deep. They can go into the well really deep. Some people, they just can't get there. They have a hard time going past a 7 or an 8. They don't even want to touch the 10. And then when it gets really, really hot, they play things very conservative and very safe. And while that's very smart, on the longer races, I do think it does people well that they're going to end up racing in hot conditions to go out and feel what it's actually like to push themselves when it's hot. Obviously, you don't want to get into the danger zone, but again, going back to just avoiding exposure, you see these good paces, see these good watts, and all you want to do is do all your stuff inside. And I think this is true for me, and I think most athletes. That first ride, you go outside and you try to do intervals, your heart rate's 10 to 15 beats higher. It's harder to breathe. It's harder to push watts. Your fueling strategy is completely different, but that's what's going to be on race day. And you see a lot of people this time of year making really terrible mistakes on fueling from a hydration standpoint when it comes to race day, because you can try to simulate the conditions inside as much as you want with, turning the fan off or wearing clothes. That's just heat. That's just how hot your body is getting. You can only solve that problem and solve that problem. You can't solve the moisture in the air and the humidity and what that does to your body. I mean, you were just talking about it before we went live, talking about how you just you have a disdain for the summer almost, and 70 degrees, you're like, God, this is terrible. But that's one thing you can't train for inside. And the only way you can train for it is to go outside. So if you're doing 200 watts inside, even if the fan is off, even if you got a long, you're just raising your core tip and creating a higher temperature for you to work off of while still trying to maintain the same watt average. Same thing if you're on the treadmill, right? Hop on the treadmill, no fan, shirt off. You're not going to have any breeze, so it's going to be hot. But you're not the breathing to me is the biggest issue. The moisture in the air, the dew point, the humidity. That is what makes things so challenging. Is if you don't start getting used to that now, the different paces, the different ranges, the different effort levels. And honestly, I mean, you should know that it feels harder if you don't do that now and you just retreat to inside because it's too much of an ego hit, to hit to your ego to see your paces differ. It might be an ego hit now, but the big ego hit's going to come on race day when you've kind of retreated and played it safe by doing all your stuff inside and then going outside. I mean, on the very, very small level, I talked about this a couple of years ago when I did Ohio 70.3. The simple fact that I don't wear a swim cap, or didn't then, I have every swim now, that I wasn't wearing a swim cap when I trained for the swim for Ohio 70.3 was a factor. Because, I mean, everyone knows this, right? You swim in a swim cap in the pool. Most pools are, at least high 70s, if not low 80s. Every time you take your swim, so you're doing a 3,000. Well, you do 2,000 and you get hot. You ditch your swim cap. It really feels like the temperature has dropped like 15 degrees. Oh, yeah. It seems so much cooler, right? So if you don't train with a swim cap on, and then you go to a race though where it's already hot and you're breathing in the air from outside, right? So high moisture, harder to breathe, less oxygen that you're getting in, and then you're getting hot in that hot water, you're going to come out already cooking. So if you're, again, and that's just the swim cap. That's just a latex swim cap I'm not wearing in training, but has a huge effect on your RP and how hot you get, over the course of a race. So if you're thinking about avoiding that and you're also avoiding biking outside in the conditions, you really aren't going to have any idea what you really are capable of on race day, from a swim pace, from bike power to run pace. And then more importantly, are you going to have kind of a disassociation from the reality of what you actually can do in these worst conditions? You're also not going to have any idea how much fluid to take in because they're hotter. So again, like the point being, one, get used to the conditions, get out there, don't avoid the exposure. And then two, when you are out there, kind of embrace the fact that it's going to feel really, really hard, and understand that, guess what? It's going to be like this till mid-September. Yeah. Embrace it. It's going to be harder. You're going to see sweat dripping from your brow. Embrace it. Get used to it. The more you do it, the easier it's going to feel.
Yeah. I mean, I did say that. It's like when it turns to summer, because we spent a couple of years in Chattanooga, and the heat down there was just like unbelievable. But to that point, I think what frustrates me sometimes is actually just kind of going out in it and not doing anything. So I actually, even though I hated that heat, just kind of going to the store or something like that, but I really enjoy training in it, and I've always kind of done that. And I think in a backdoor way, it's helped me with racing because of like all that stuff you're saying. But to train out, when going in Nashville, and I'd go out and run in the lab at, the hottest part of the day, and it was just absolutely torture. And I don't think like it made me anything like super thing, but it definitely works as, going out in tough conditions. And I have an athlete who had an 1.5-hour run this weekend with some hills. And he was saying, man, I couldn't get my breath. I was going up for it took me like 40 minutes to kind of settle in. And then once I got there, then I started feeling good. So I think that it is sort of this mental thing in a lot of ways. You go out and you're like, damn, it's too hot. You can't relax, and you got all that stuff going, but you almost have to get through it. I've talked about, you kind of get out of your way a little bit, or, out of your plan a little bit on the race, and you get a little bit over it, and you can kind of figure out a way to settle down and recover in race. And I think the same is true for workouts and going out into it. And obviously we've gotten, I'm sure you get tons of comments about, man, I was on the bike, it was so windy, I think next time I'll get on the trainer or whatever. I'm like, no, that's good. Yeah, it definitely sucks, and you can't like lay down the big numbers that you want to lay down, but that's such a huge part of it, is dealing with the conditions. And there's something about, like you said, being outside. It's more than just heat. It's wind, it's elements, the fresh air that kind of, I don't know. I think in some ways tires you out a little bit more if you're not used to it. But dealing with how to hydrate or get through times maybe when you don't have enough hydration, I just think, we call it training. And for, I think a lot of people want to, just crush every workout or whatever, but there's so many other motives involved with training, and it's like getting used to that kind of thing and figuring out in your mind how to handle it and how to cool down, just internally and, calm like the discomfort and the anxiety that you got going on and settle your heart rate down and all these sorts of things. There's just people around, there's cars driving around, all that shit, and you get to the, you train inside the whole time and then you get on a race course with, 2,000 other riders and, it has an effect. We talk about handling skills and all that kind of stuff. And, even I feel comfortable on a bike most of the time, but sometimes you get in these situations where like, it'll really spike your anxiety levels, based on a little situation that happened. And how do you reclaim that and calm down and just get back in and focus in your breath and the whole 9 yards. So I actually, as much as I don't like to stand around outside in heat, I love to go work it in the heat, and sometimes I'll purposely, like I said, go out in the worst time. And I like that challenge because if you can do it when it's harder than hopefully your race is going to be, that's going to be the key to, maybe going hard, making the race feel easier or whatever.
Well, in my opinion, the heat are the hills of temperature. People avoid it as much as they can, but it's really, really, really good for you because, like hills help you on hills help you on flats, flats help you on flats, and they don't help you on hills. Same thing with hotter weather, right? Obviously to an extent, right? If you do all your stuff at the hottest time of day, you're never really going to be able to go as hard as you possibly can go, right? Because the point is, in some workouts, not all, very, very few, right? Is to, 1 or 2 workouts a week should be ones where your RPE is super high. You really want to produce the most watts, the fastest pace in swimming or running as possible. Sometimes you can't do that outside, and that's okay. But the rest of your stuff, right, should be outside as much as you possibly can, right? It's great for increasing blood plasma. A lot of people say heat training is the poor man's altitude. There's just a lot of benefit to get from it, but you have to especially if you want to get that seasonal EPO, right? You go out and you train in June, July, August, even first part of September, then it starts to cool off some. Well, if you haven't done any of your training, outside, you're not going to get nearly as much of a bump when the weather turns cool and the dew point goes down, the humidity goes down, as if you had been outside, right? It's really, really good for you. And if you're going to race in those conditions, get out there now. And if it's not an immediate race, like it's not till August or September, you don't have to get out there all at once, right? Because that can be, and I think this is where athletes kind of have to use their best judgment on where they are mentally. Because not all athletes are objective enough to take that hit. Because it is a hit. Even swimming, right? After remind all the swimmers I work with too, like when you go from inside short course to outdoor long course, when it's warm, you're going from short pool inside with AC and a controlled humidity and dew point to outdoor 50-meter long course, harder, longer, slower. And you're breathing in high dew point, high humidity, high temperature. So it's kind of like the double whammy. But most people don't think of that because they're in a pool and they're wild and they can't feel themselves sweating profusely. So if you're one of those people, and again, this is kind of where you have to do like a self-assessment and be very careful with that self-assessment that you don't become too comfortable in that. To say, hey, listen, I don't want to take a lot of losses right now. I can't really afford to take a lot of losses. I'm in a mentally and emotionally, semi-fragile or fragile state. So maybe going and doing all my swimming and riding and running outside right now, maybe that's not the best thing for me mentally. My watts are going to be lower, or my heart rate's going to be higher relative to my watts. My pace is going to be slower. Heart rate's going to be higher. Swimming's going to feel more challenging. I don't really need that in my life right now. I'm just trying to string together some few positive weeks. Well, if that's you, and that's perfectly fine, and there's a lot of you out there like that, is all right. then for all my hard workouts with quality or, intensity, I'm going to do them all inside. I'm going to take those wins. I'm going to listen to my body. I'm going to get fitter. I'm going to get faster. But if I've got an easy ride with no obligation, no expectations, if I've got an easy run, that's just aerobic, right? And aerobic running is can be done without a pace. It's just conversation pace. Same as cycling. If I've got that, I'm going outside because there shouldn't be an expectation or a pace. I still want to get exposure. I still want to slowly adapt my way to it. It's very similar to it's going like cold turkey, trying to quit smoking or drinking or trying to give up sugar. To me, it's like slowly phasing your way in instead of like just flipping the switch the next day. Like flipping the switch the next day is a great way to get you, turned off and totally burnt from whatever it is you're trying to do, whatever new habit you're trying to create, because it's too much all at once. Phase yourself in, right? So the same thing goes for getting outside and getting hot, and being in the conditions. Because the other thing is, from a coaching standpoint, if I'm giving you 12 hours with some intensity, then you go in and you go start doing all of those outside. Well, it's a much, much higher stress. It's harder on the body. So wean yourself in, right? Again, if you're not accustomed to the heat, if you're not acclimated, wean yourself into it. Start with maybe 2 or 3 sessions a week, and maybe do it for 2 weeks. Then the next week, 3 to 4 sessions a week. And then the next 2 weeks, 5 to 6 sessions a week. And that could just be with multiple sessions a day. That could just be, 3-4 days a week. Still keep some inside, because I do think you can just get burnt to a crisp if you're doing everything outside. It's very similar. It's not as much physical as it is mental in the summer, but come late February, mid-March, every kind of coach deals with trainer burnout. They're just done. I'm tired of staring at a wall. I'm tired of staring at this. I'm tired of doing this and that. But you just get burned out from doing the same thing. Same thing with the summer, right? Some people just get over it. You're like, I'm tired of getting burned. I'm tired of the heat and humidity. I'm tired, or the wind, right? You talked about wind. To me, the wind is the biggest thing. You just get tired of getting beat up. That's here in the winter. It's like, I'm tired of getting down. I'm tired of getting, the wind. I'm just going to stay inside, or I'm not going to do it. And then you realize it's very similar to that first time you start to walk in the marathon of your Ironman. It feels so good. You're like, God, that was so much easier to ride inside. It was so much easier to run the treadmill. It was so much easier to swim inside. God, that feels good. And of course, what are you going to want? You're going to want it again, because it feels good. And then you're going to want it again the next day, and it's going to feel good. And the more you do that, the harder it's going to be. You're going to have to fight that resistance to go back outside and to go back and do something challenging. And then after about the third day, and I see it all the time with athletes, about the third day, you become so resistant to doing the thing you were doing before that's semi-uncomfortable, not bad for you, just semi-uncomfortable, that now you've lost a little bit of that acclimation. So now you're even more disinterested in doing it again. So the longer you go, right, in between kind of taking those breaks, the harder it is. So just find yourself a happy medium. If you get burnt one day and you get just roasted and it takes too much out of you, don't go back out and do it the next day, because you're going to create a bad relationship with going hard and being uncomfortable in those conditions. Wean yourself into it, and then just monitor it on a day-to-day. Don't just go all in, right? Same thing as like, yes, the period. I do think like the periodic, like, that we did training for Louisville that year. Like, we went out in the middle of the day on the track at, at Overton High School at like noon and fried ourselves. Do I think that's good for you occasionally? Probably. I think it's good for you. I think it's good for the soul, good for the mind. It's good to kind of like toughen up a little bit. Is it good to do every week? Hell no. Because there's only so many times you can touch the hot stove. And let's be honest, like that's usually what asphalt feels like after, come late July, early August. So wean yourself into it, but don't avoid the exposure. At the same time, don't just jump with both feet in. And I think that's something where you have to just understand what kind of athlete you are, where you are mentally, where you are emotionally, what you can handle physically. Because again, it's also added stress, right? Just like telling our athletes, like, hey, once it gets to 5 degrees or -10, I know you can run outside. I know you are tough, but it's probably not going to yield any benefit. The stress is going to be too high on your body to recover from. Maybe it's not a good idea, right? And I know in Texas they're like, well, then I'm not ever allowed to run outside in the summer because it's always hot, humidity's always high, humidity dew point's always high. So it's again, you have to listen and you have to honestly just take things week to week, but don't avoid it, but don't overexpose either. And I think that's a delicate balance when you're trying to figure out the best way. But in my opinion, if you're going out there and you're far away from your race, do all of your do your intensity inside and your long rides outside, fairly easy, get those out. Then maybe do one outside intensity and one outside long. If you're getting close to race day, then you got to do your outside stuff, your long stuff outside, long run and long ride. You got to, and even honestly, like if you're doing a long swim on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that 3-day block needs to be outside. Go outside, swim long. If I'm doing 70.3, I know it's going to be hot. I might do Monday through Thursday all inside. Because some of that's going to be recovery from the hard weekend, and some of that recovery is going to be needed from the higher stress that you're gonna take on. That is because of the heat. So you take that, right? So Monday through Thursday, Monday's probably recovery day from the weekend, and then maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is probably going to be some quality, a little bit more intensity. So you're going to get fitter. Maybe Thursday's easier to get ready for Friday. Friday long swim, I'm outside. I'm going to have a little bit of higher stress. I'm going to kind of see what it feels like to swim along in those conditions. Got my swim cap on. I'm making sure I'm staying at not as hot as possible, but it's exact conditions I'm going to have on race day. I'm going to recover well. And then the next day on Saturday, on that Saturday, I'm going to do whatever it is I need to do to feel, like exactly like what's going to be on race day. Humidity's high, dew point's high. I'm out there. I know what it's like. I know what the feeling is. And guess what? The first one you do is probably going to suck, because you're probably going to underfuel. You're going to think you got enough water because that's what you've always been using, and you realize how much sweat you're losing. You're going to need more, right? And then you're going to have to run off the bike more than likely, and that's also going to be challenging because it's definitely not going to feel like it used to feel. And then same thing on that Sunday run, making sure you're doing it outside early in the day. If you really want to be specific about it, sleep in that morning. Maybe do like an hour easy spin to kind of get the legs going and remind yourself how fatigued they are. And then after that, go out in the exact time of day, especially for a 70.3, maybe not for a full, but for a 70.3, if you expect to be off the bike at 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock, go and do your run at that time of day. Because it's a different kind. Like humidity's lower, dew point's lower usually, but temperature's hotter. All right, in the morning, temperature's usually a little bit cooler. Cool is a relative term. Dew point, humidity a little bit higher. And those are also two different types of stressors. Some people respond really, really well and run well in the heat, but not high humidity and high dew point. It's like there's a difference between sitting in a sauna and a steam room. If you have one of those preferences, you probably already kind of know like which one you're going to do better at, which one you're not.
You had mentioned how good walking feels, and years ago I had a controversial opinion about if you wanted to have a faster Ironman race, then don't walk the marathon. So, but what I think about that, and everything you were saying there is that, yeah, it's all physical stuff, but I think, at least for me, I think most of the time the Ironman marathon is a mental struggle, and that walking, once you start walking, it does feel good. And even though I've approached these things with a run walk mentality the last couple of years, I think back to when I used to run outside all the time in the heat, and I'd go into Shelby Bottoms and run up those hills in the heat and do all that stuff. For me, that was mental, because we know that the Ironman marathon or the 70.3 half is gonna hurt, right? And it can get to this point, right, where you sort of just like, I don't know, man, I get it. So when I think about going outside to train, and maybe the conditions aren't beautiful, whether it's up here it's been like sleeting sometimes, and I'm just like, yeah, that has to be me right now outside. So I want to go find some of these tough conditions, but it's mainly it's for mental toughness, because you can train all year and have a really good fitness and everything, but the minute you get out there and you're a little uncomfortable, so are you not going outside because you just don't want to and it's a little uncomfortable, or because, like you're saying, you're just fatigued and deep, that a longer run outside or a run outside at this time of day is really going to zap you? I think those are the things you want to pay attention to. But is it just because you look outside and you're like, oh man, I don't want to deal with that? That's when I think you need to deal with it, especially if you feel pretty good. Just go out and you gotta. I like what you said about weaning into it, because you gotta expose, and you don't want to like, well, I need to heat train. I got a 2-hour run. I'm going to start here. That's usually probably not the right approach. You kind of got to get used to it a little bit. It is like training. You kind of build that muscle. And for me, that heat training is a mental muscle mostly, because yeah, sure, you're going to have, you want to hydrate and you want to be all in that. But a lot of times it becomes, how do you control your thermostat? And I think a lot of that can be mental. I mean, I think it comes down to pacing and understanding how to start the day. A lot of times when I have a long heat run, I really am cautious about starting slow and making sure that my sweat is because if you start hot, you're just going to sweat, and it's that feeling you get. It's sort of like really depleted.
Once it's over, it's over.
Yeah, really depleted super fast. But if you kind of really chill into it and you just kind of get a little bit of sweat going, and then like everything's working right and you're getting some water in and hydrating, and then it doesn't feel like, I swear, you can have these hot runs that don't feel bad. And I'm like, why is that? Well, it's because your system is working right. But if you go out, that's why I think a lot of people obviously get in trouble off the bike in a 70.3 even, is that, you went harder, you're cooking on the bike, and then you don't feel like you're that hot, but you really are. So you got to be careful. I mean, to me, that transition too is a critical one. And I've backfired on that at Louisville that one year. I got off that 100, it was 100 degrees, and I got off that bike feeling good. I was like, damn, I got a little spring here. I'm going to go. And I ran that first mile and it was over. It can be over. That's why I'm always talking to people about, like, I always say, start every event like consciously slow, because you're hyped and you're going to be probably going normals. But if you're not thinking in the terms of like, hey, I gotta ease back here a little bit, you're probably going to be going out too hot in everything. And usually it's, that run, you might feel great for that first mile or two, and then all of a sudden that heat catches up with you and you're not ready for it. And then it just turns everything to shit. But man, it's a really critical point, I think, for most people, especially in a hot race, is that coming off the bike with that wind in your face and you feel pretty damn good, and then all of a sudden the engine stops and your car hood is just overheating, and you push it too hard and then you can't get it back.
I mean, that's exactly why the incident rate for heat stroke or death by overheating is so high not so high, but so much higher in 5Ks and 10Ks than it is in half marathons and full marathons. Because you go out so hard and so fast, your core temp and your body temp climbs so quickly. By the time you've overcooked it, it's too late. You can't walk it back. Whereas half marathon, full marathon, 70.3 distance, full distance, you start off slow, gradually doing it, right? That you just you're at such a slow rate of intensity, and your heart rate and your core temp is climbing at such a slow rate. You feel it quicker, and then you do have some opportunity to kind of walk it back a little bit. Now, are you gonna lose time by walking it back some, right? By slowing down on the bike and taking in more fluids? Probably. Are you definitely going to lose time on the run by having to walk some and cool yourself? Yes. But there's a huge difference in like running and walking the aid stations and then running and walking the last 6 miles. And that's the game you have to play, right? It's like, what's going to allow me to lose the least amount of time? And then going into your race, like, that's why some people just like the same reason some people love ocean swims and love hilly races and love hot races is because they also know that it's not just about who's the fittest. It's about who's the smartest. Who's going to make the best decisions, right? That's why he's always used to love going to Louisville when it was really, really hot, because I was never the fittest athlete, but I was like, man, if I can just like be really, really conservative and play it really, really smart, then I'm going to end up having a much better day relative against the field than I would if it was 65, partly cloudy, and no wind. because then there's a much bigger gap for making a mistake, right? Because the conditions aren't eating at you versus wind and heat. The margin for error is it's slim. You just can't make it, right? But the opportunity to make those mistakes is huge. And so if you're that athlete, like you go out and doing these runs and you're practicing, taking a bottle with you, one to fuel and one to cool, you're practicing being successful on race day. Instead of going out there and on even on a ride, right? You're going out there and you're cooling yourself off. You're like, don't picture yourself, and it's weird, right? Because we always like to picture ourselves PRing, crushing a bike split, coming off the bike first, seeing, X miles per hour, or seeing X pace, or crossing the finish line. Like, if you're signed up for a race, it's going to be really, really hard and really, really challenging. Instead of picturing these things based on speed or performance, I would recommend getting out in these harder conditions and visualizing you passing people that are suffering. Like, if I'm out here right now and I'm cool myself on race day, I'm going to be doing this same thing, and I'm going to be passing people at mile 90 that passed me at mile 30. It's the same exact thing was when I was watching that last Ironman Louisville, and all these high-end top elite age groupers were leaving transition in just their tri-kit. They didn't want to take the time to put on arm warmers or a windbreaker or booties or gloves, anything. They just wanted to be first out of transition. And guess what? They were first back in a bus because they were too cold. Mm-hmm. I mean, we saw them by the droves, and it's like that at every cold race, and it's just like that every hot race too. You don't pay enough respect to the conditions. And so, again, like when you're out there on these runs and these rides, don't picture yourself again like, breaking the tape or setting, land speed records. Picture yourself outsmarting the competition, out fueling the competition, out training the competition, not by the volume that you do and the speed in which you do it, but by practicing making these really important decisions that you have to make on race day and making them in training. Heading out at 2:00, getting burnt, not getting like sunburned, but like getting so hot that you've got to walk some. All right, learn my lesson. I'm going to take it easier, right? You're running, and then picture yourself running past people that are walking, not because they overcooked the bike, which they probably did, right? But picture yourself passing people. Even if you're moving slowly, you're still moving in a jog when people are walking with their head down. Picture that. Because to me, in those races that are really hot and really challenging, just like it was, on the flip side, or again, in their cold race, like you guys did in Wisconsin, it was all, track workouts out the window. Your intervals out the window. It was who was able to stay the warmest and keep moving and was the toughest. And that's just something that you have to pay attention to and remember when you're training is, again, disconnect from the pace and the performance and embrace the training that you're doing for your mind and your body and your soul. Because on race day, like I remember when that first year I did Louisville, when the first year out of rehab, I remember when it was so hot, I was like, thank God. Because I had done so much of my training in the heat. I was like, I know I'm not anywhere near the shape that I'd like to be for this, but I know that I'm at least prepared to suffer, and I know I'm at least prepared to start off slow. Last in the water. I remember people passed me like I was standing still, the first 20 miles of that course. And then they slowly kept coming back. And I remember running past people in the marathon. They were just walking. Because even the fastest jog even the slowest jog is faster than the fastest walk. And so, again, embrace that kind of stuff, and you can train for it. And I also think that helps alleviate some of the expectation that you have, or maybe some of the pace shock, right, or the power shock you might have as you go out for some of these hotter, warmer sessions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, it's you hit it. I always try to reiterate that this is training and this is practice. A lot of this is just practice, like if you have a 30, 40 minute brick off of a longer bike or whatever, And, always have athletes, that just go out and hammer that thing or whatever. And I'm like, no, work on figuring out how to settle into it. And then by the end of, that 40 minutes or whatever, you should just be feeling like, all right, I could keep cruising. I don't want to see like a 5K record off the bike right there. I think you have to train in a way that relates to the race. That's the way I think about shit all the time. It's sort of like, what am I going to do in this situation if it happens out there? Or how can I come off this bike and, actually settle into this run like it is a run? I mean, it's like instead of 4 miles or whatever, I mean, you got a marathon or you got a half marathon. So it's like setting that all up. And that's what, when you talk about outsmarting people, that's the kind of stuff that kind of gets lost because we get so wrapped up in our daily, Training Peaks, medals and all these kinds of things that we're not thinking about the big picture. And I think every day you're out there, you can figure out ways to, I've talked about it before when I do a long run and I'm just like struggling. All I try to do is figure out, all right, how can I make, just imagine this is the feeling you have, and you got 4 miles left. How are you going to pull it off? How are you going to pull it back together? And get your groove and just suck it up rather than thinking you only got 1 mile. Just start mentally imagining, visualizing different things, like this is how it's going to feel. Could I do this for another 6 miles, even though I only have 1 left? Start thinking in that term. But yeah, I think it's a lot of opportunities out there to really kind of almost like juxtapose your training into a race vibe in your mind. And instead of just trying to always like crush every, hour workout or whatever like that, use it as a tool to build for the race.
Yeah. Which again, and we can close it out here, but like, that's why we're such a fan of, maybe not always your intervals, but if it's an easy, moderate day or a chill, all that should be done by RPE. How should it feel? How do you feel? And that's going to feel very, very different if it's 90 or it's 60. Then the pace might be a minute to a minute 15 and change difference. So again, I love what you said there about, we're in training. We're not in swim, bike, and run performance testing daily. You are in training for your event. And I think most people strictly look at the demands or what they think are the demands on the performance number side of the race. Swimming 1.2 or whatever, whatever distance, biking 56, running 13.1. Everyone obsesses about the time and the distance. Very, very few athletes I've come to find put just as much emphasis on the conditions and the environment that they're going to do those distances in as they do the distances themselves. And that can make all the difference in the world in training in those conditions. And what is the real demand and energy cost? Same reason for like, is the energy cost a lot lower if I'm doing an indoor, trainer ride with a fan versus the energy cost doing that same exact trainer ride, same exact interval session outside with a high humidity, high dew point, high temp. Totally different stress. It'll stress the rest of your bike and it'll definitely impact your run. So again, don't just be so focused on, the numbers themselves. Make sure you're taking into account the environment in which you will be competing. High wind, check your front wheel. Is it too deep? Or can you practice enough in the wind to where it doesn't even feel like wind? That's going to be a check for you and a red mark for the rest. Same thing with swimming. Is it going to be rough or is it going to be calm? Bike, are the roads going to be bumpy or are they going to be smooth? Wind, no wind. There's just all these things. Again, take those into consideration. And again, as we leave you today, put just as much effort in preparing for the conditions and the demands of the day on the external side that you can to an extent as you do on the internal. As always, We appreciate you. We love you guys. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike, he's available. Mike at c26triathlon.com. If you need anything from me specifically, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right. Sounds
Adios,
good, man.
amigos. Yeah, we'll see you Thursday.
See you.